They say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. But in Nigeria's politics, we have turned flattery into full-time employment. Now, this weekend, the defections came like confetti. It was a carnival at this point. Governors, lawmakers, party bigwigs, all dancing their way from opposition to ruling party. And just when you thought you've seen it all, Edo State decided to raise the stakes. In style, as usual. Governor Monday Okpebholo, in what could easily pass for a fashion memo from the presidency, told his newly sworn-in commissioners and advisors to always wear their ASUU cap to executive council meetings or risk being sent back home. I know you're about to say, Judith, it's not true, but it is. You heard that right. No cap, no cabinet. In his words, and I quote, "If you come to the ESCO meeting without wearing the ASUU cap, you will go back home. You will go back." Apparently, loyalty in 2025 isn't demonstrated through good governance or policy innovation. It's displayed on your head. The message was clear. Forget competence. Just coordinate your cap. Fashion. Nigerians, very stylish. Now, before you think that this is satire, there's an actual video. The governor said it on record, in public, while his newly appointed officials, wait for it, they applauded and they even cheered. The ASUU cap, he explained, was a symbol of unity and respect for the president. Not about coat of arms, though, it was cap. But the irony is this: when political loyalty becomes a dress code, governance starts to look like a costume party. And if you thought that this week couldn't even get any more theatrical than it already is, an entire federal agency publicly celebrated a private citizen's birthday. Not a data release, not a service update, but a birthday post. They found time to make graphics. They budgeted graphics for this. And it read like something straight out of a family WhatsApp group chat, to be honest. Except this one came with the seal of government. And Nigerians online, as usual, of course, dragged NIM, which is the NIMC, through digital mode because we were like, we can't even take this. What is this? And the agency quietly deleted it. They deleted the post, but the damage was done. Because that right there is the heart of the problem. We have turned governance into a spectacle of sycophancy, where state institutions now compete for who can flatter power the loudest. While schools are short, while prices are soaring, and while public universities are on strike, some of our leaders are busy enforcing cap etiquette and curating birthday shout-outs. And we wonder why citizens are losing faith in democracy. What this really reveals is a shrinking space for independence, whether in thought, whether in service, or in dissent. Because at this point, loyalty to the powerful replaces loyalty to the people. And when that happens, when even agencies meant to serve the nation start to kind of relating to the ruling family, democracy begins to rot from within. This isn't about caps, I gotta admit, or just let's be clear, or about cakes and birthday posts, but it's about a culture that is slowly seeping into, or rather, should I say, it's been here, a culture that reeks of sycophancy, a culture where mediocrity is rewarded, and civility is the new political currency. You gotta serve or kneel. On your mandate we shall stand. Where the cost of honesty is exile, and the reward for flattery is promotion or appointment. And maybe that's why the opposition is thinning when you think about it. It's not because Nigerians don't care about governance, but because courage has become too expensive. So yes, Edo may have its matching caps and the president's son may have his trending birthday wishes, but somewhere between the caps and the birthday cakes, our democracy is losing its dignity. And if we are not careful, we might soon find that the real national uniform isn't the ASUU cap, it's actually silence. But as always, I would say, don't worry. There's always another party, there's gonna be another defection, And very soon there will be another post. After all, in this political season, and as 2027 nears, sycophancy isn't just a habit at this point, it's government policy. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Breakfast Extra. I'm not alone as usual. We've got my incomparable co-host, Monsignor Appeals, on standby. He's looking dapper for you this morning.
Thank you very much. And you're very harsh. I listened to that like as if it was a Dr. Dre Lost Art that was just released. That's actually true.
Oh, gosh, that is the most flattering thing you said to me.
You should call
Dr. Dre?
Well, yeah, it did sound really good, except it was advocacy. Caps, cakes, and lack of political caution. Is it your cap? Buy Nigerian, dress Nigerian. Edo State wants you to help with the fashion style, and it should be Nigerian. So I think, hey, of course I kid. I mean, honestly, with everything that's happened in the past week and everybody shifting ships, or jumping ships, I should say, and shifting political parties, I don't know if the APC really believes that it's doing well, because if you think that this is a sign of, oh, we're doing well and people want to join, you should be very, very cautious of the fact that the international society, the international world, well, everybody else is looking at you and thinking, is that democracy at the end of the day? But you know what, hey, we've got plenty of that conversation yet to come inside of today's show. So I'll wait for you.
All right. As always, ladies, gentlemen, boys and girls, let's get started. Welcome to Breakfast Extra.
And you're welcome. It's another good morning here for Nigeria. And of course, for you all, thank you very much for joining us. You tuned into Breakfast Extra on News Central, your weekend guide through the headlines, the politics, and the people shaping our nation. Now, today, on the big report, we turn to the classroom. ASUU is back at the negotiation table, but students are bracing for deja vu. It's not a course. Is this fight for funding and welfare worth another academic setback? We'll hear from our correspondents, Maya Abubakar, and education expert Dr. Peter Ogudoro. On the big story, we shift to the turbulent world of politics, defections, and tearing through the opposition. What does this mean for democracy, party credibility, and the road to 2027? Analysts Dr. Sam Amadi and Kunle Lawal will weigh in. In perspectives, we take it to the streets, from Lagos to Enugu, where Nigerians are reacting in real time. Is it betrayal, strategy, or simply politics as usual? And later, we report from Kogi State, where troops have dismantled a major bandit hideout in Kababunu. Our correspondent, Mono Balagbobo, brings that frontline update. And it's a packed weekend of insight analysis and real voices, so grab your cup of whatever it might be that's your preference, and let's get Breakfast Extra started. Judith is here with me again, and I must still make reference to the cake that was shared across, what is it, the NIMC?
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's very interesting. I'm so glad that Nigerians were able to galvanize in troops and be like, this is not okay, bring it down immediately. And they quietly did delete the post, and it was about time. And I think that whenever we continue to use that platform to voice our dissent, small progress is progress. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't matter. So I'm really...
An angel gains a feather.
Yeah.
One feather each
and one star is reunited. You know what I mean? So exactly. I think it's important. So yeah, we're all excited. But anyway, we're going to go on a short break, shall we? When we return, we get started with our big story for this morning. And this time, it's going to be an economic reality check as IMF calls for fiscal reform as capital flight rises. After the break, stay with us. And let's begin with our big story for this morning. We take a hard look at Nigeria's economic trajectory in light of the latest calls from the International Monetary Fund. The IMF is commending Nigeria's recent fiscal reforms, smarter spending, stronger tax systems, but it also is raising alarm bells. It points to risks from domestic borrowing, rising debt, and capital flight. Now, this is an economic reality check. And the question is, are we on stable ground, or are we just teetering on the edge? Zeno.
Well, with us this morning, we've got two distinguished guests. Professor Ken Ife, development economist and also public policy analyst, and also Professor Bongo Adi, professor of economics at Lagos Business School, will probe whether Nigeria is doing enough, where the risks lie, and what structural shifts are required to curb capital flight and also deliver sustainable growth. Now let's begin. I know Professor Kenny Faye is with us. Good morning, sir. Thank you very much for joining us very bright and early, sir.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, as our first guest, I mean, you really set up early for us, and we want to say thank you very much. Sir, the IMF has raised very interesting points here. First of all, it commended Nigeria. It says fuel subsidy removal, of course, that was a necessary correction, tax reforms, step in the right direction, and also steps towards exchange rate unification. Oh, yeah, well, we're still working on that one. It, however, raised other concerns. Among these concerns was rising public debt. You can't continue to tax the public, even if you're reforming your tax base, yet without producing. But I'm very, very curious regarding what the aim of the IMF is. Is it a partner right now? Is it acting as a partner, or is it acting as a pressure pot for Nigeria? And what are the impacts of these efforts?
Yeah, you need to put World Bank and IMF in the same basket because they're all Bretton Woods institutions who have a responsibility to police the economy and especially the monetary side of it. Now, the good thing, let's start with the good news before we head into the bad news. The good news is that our reserves have gone up to over $42 billion from about 33. Our growth to our debt to GDP ratio has come down from over 45 or 50%, of almost 45, and now down to 39%, which means there could be more headroom. Our budget deficit has also dropped to 2.6. And a lot of indicators are positive. Our foreign exchange regime is under control, allowing some inflow, albeit from portfolio investment rather than foreign direct investment, because that's a big trouble there. Then told that the GDP growth rate has gone up to 4.2%, and then rebasing of the economy has also affected the interest rates. Sorry, the inflation. Inflation is now around 18.2%. All of them are good ticks. You tick everything is good, but it still comes to the main crunch. The crunch is that all this growth we are having are not inclusive. They are not leading to employment, and they are not having any effect on poverty reduction. And there are so many reasons that have been advanced for those. And in fact, even in the World Bank analysis, their report, they went head on what I have been screaming about over the last 4 or 5 years, that we have more to answer on fiscal sustainability. We just are not there. We are totally working against the fiscal law 2007, and there's so many of it. There's so much to talk about that when you have the time. And then we could do more. They actually hammered on food inflation, and gratefully, food inflation has come down today. To deliver this 18.2% inflation, and I'm thinking we can do more. And the last straw is, of course, what they say about, increase the social safety net, which I agree, but not from borrowing. You can do that with anything you want. You earn 36 trillion, with your your target in September. Spend that money. If you want to share that money. Don't go and borrow money to share. And I keep saying it to World Bank, you cannot lend money to Nigeria only to be used on conditional cash transfer because it's illegal. So give us your grant and we can share those. So they have now finally come back to acknowledge that that is the case, that they should borrow, they should use their resources to expand the social safety net. So these are some of the things that are there. And the warning is always there about debt sustainability. That has been a big standing warning. And we'll find time to go into that detail.
Okay. Professor Ken, you talked about unemployment, the fact that there is no employment in Nigeria, despite the reforms that are being made. So I'm wondering, when we talk about capital flight, which is also directly responsible for the unemployment that we have in Nigeria, are the reforms that Nigeria is making now capable of reinstalling investor confidence, bringing them back to Nigeria so that we can have more jobs? Are we walking in the right direction, albeit that is a very slow process?
Well, you see, you've jumped the gun. You're talking about bringing investors, bringing investment. Investment in what? And what enabling environment do you have for the kind of investment that you want? And let me tell you the investment that you want. You see, we are an import-dependent economy by design, by the International Division of Labor, by the 800 years of extractive relationship, repressive and oppressive extractive economic relationship between Nigeria and the global north. And if your economy is import dependent, it doesn't matter what you say, what you do. Any global macroeconomic headwind will affect you. What otherwise, even if it is health or COVID or supply chain disruption, it doesn't matter what it is, it will affect you. Otherwise, why will Russia crisis affect Nigeria when we have gas and oil and they have gas and oil? It's because Russia supplies 40% of gas to Europe, and when they turned down the tap, prices went up, and Europe is our second largest partner. So we carried it. That contagion effect comes as an inflation pass-through. So we're suffering from those. And the problem is this: when you are exporting raw material, which is what the design is, you are actually exporting your jobs and we are importing poverty. That is the point. So unless we look at two strategies, one, export-led growth strategy, and then link it to an industrialization strategy. And China has been able to remove over 400 million out of poverty because of export-led strategy, growth strategy. So is Indonesia, Malaysia, South Korea. All these countries, hundreds and hundreds of millions of people are removed from poverty. But we are nowhere there. So it's not easy a lip service to say NEPC go and do that. They're doing nothing because the NEPC cannot even talk to Minister of Finance or even Central Bank. So what we require is an orchestrated approach to developing a serious commitment to industrialization of our country. And for you to do this, all the macroeconomic policy frameworks must focus on industrialization and tell us what they're going to do. The biggest culprit is fiscal policy. I can't begin to name to you the damage that has been done to an industrialization by the fiscal policy. From opening the door, and then all the textiles from China entered here, killed 2 million jobs. All the factories in Kanu, Kaduna, and Lagos, they're gone. Or is it the tire that we are manufacturing, or is it the car that we are assembling? It is there that the problem lies. So, and then the other one, that the trade policy, we haven't even got one yet. You need to have one that points to industrialization policy. You have to have investment industrial policy. You don't have one. You have one that points to that. Then central bank has to come back and tell us what it can do to this agenda, as well as employment plus all the convergence of the multiple policy must come and address industrialization.
Let's bring in Professor Bongo Adi. He is a professor of economics at the Lagos Business School. You're welcome to the program, Professor Adi. I also have to ask you, Professor Ken has set the tone for my next question, which is going to be about structural constraints as to why Nigeria still doesn't have that credibility when it comes to delivering on its promise, giving the fiscal policy reforms that this administration has taken on. But most importantly, the IMF has also warned that, about 20 sub-Saharan African countries are at risk of debt distress, and Nigeria is not immune. And so when we look at our vulnerability, where does it lie? Is it in external debt? Is it on our exchange rate exposure, or a rollover risk? Professor Adi.
It's a combination of all the things you mentioned and more. If you are referring to the risk of contagion, I think Professor Ken has already detailed that. When we depend so much on the rest of the world for our revenue, our fiscus, if I may say that, you are so exposed to whatever happens. Any global macroeconomic, turbulence will definitely throw you, out of order. Yeah, but having said that, are there things that we can do in the short and immediate and long term to create a buffer, of resilience against all that global turbulence? I think there are. Professor Ken also mentioned, the issue of Russia's gas supply to Europe, whereby Europe is also our very strong trading partner. Even though I know that, trade relationship has really shifted in the sense that China is now our major and leading trade partner. So, but then Europe, in terms of proximity, is very close to us. When it comes to fiscal sustainability, because that's the whole thing we're talking about here, which is what will really insulate an economy against volatility, contagion effect, and also give it that resilience to navigate through different economic situations and be able to create conditions, enabling conditions for industrialization and improve livelihood and welfare for its citizens. So it's all about fiscal sustainability. Now, Nigeria is actually at an advantage position, which we have failed to exploit over the years. And I need to talk about this again. Mm-hmm. Now, Professor Ken actually said something that is very important, and it's good that we recognize that we are, kind of a primary commodity exporting economy. That's all. And moreover, our export profile or export space is not diversified. We're only exporting crude oil majorly. So every other thing is just very insignificant. Our non-agricultural exports, is not that much. Our, participation in global value chain is also negligible. But then, recent turnaround in the system has shown that it is possible for Nigeria to actually launch its way back into the global value chain, which is the real issue here. I keep saying this, for any leading product that you can mention or that you can refer to today, you will notice that not just Nigeria, that no African country participates in this value chain. Whether it is in the semiconductors, in computers, or any manufactured product. So we are the consuming end of it. And once you are either the consuming end or at the raw material end, you are not part of that value chain because you're not adding any value to the chain. But then is it possible for us to really participate actively in this dynamic and life-changing global value chains? Yes, it is. I was talking about the recent changes or turnarounds that we've witnessed, which is the Dangote refinery. So there are two value chains that we currently participate. Which is, like I said, an advantage that we have over so many other African countries. We are in the global value chain for refined petroleum, thanks to Dangote. We are also in the global value chain for something like fertilizer, thanks to Dangote again. We are also in the global value chain for gas, thanks to LNG. Okay, so now these are things we've seen how they work, and we know the models that make them work. So is it possible for us to leverage these productive and efficient and profitable models that have launched us into the global value chain to see if there are other areas that we can expand? Now, talking about gas, I learned just like last week, the Trans-Saharan gas pipeline has hit Morocco. So it is now at the last phase before it gets to, I think, either Spain or Italy, and then our gas should make its way to Europe. These are, investments that should have been done many years ago. But then now that we are seeing them, we want to see government's commitment to this, because I don't want to, belabor the obvious issues of the things that we are not doing right. But then let's focus on the things that we're doing right. Is it possible for us to leverage those areas to turn around things here? I think yes. Nigeria has some promise. If we're able to pursue the gas agenda and get our gas to Europe, as it is always said, Nigeria is actually an ocean of gas, an island, whereas oil is just an island. So we are more of a gas nation. So we can actually leverage that, okay, to turn around our fiscal situation. We've seen that it can be done. The model of LNG, the model of Dangote. So these are things that we should do in the short, short and medium and long term that will turn around the prospects of, of the nation. I don't want to talk about the tax reforms and all of that, because I have a different opinion regarding whether those things are going to work, whether they're going to improve welfare. Because the way you look at it, we need to look at it critically before we can actually draw any sort of conclusion on those.
All right, Professor Adi, very quickly, there's a report that we saw, a review that noted that Nigeria's currency depreciation has raised the local currency burden of external debt. even as reforms have improved somewhat transparency, some will note. But given global volatility, which you've pointed to, and also Professor Ken has pointed to, how should Nigeria manage its exchange rate? Very importantly, whether should it be more flexible with buffers or a hybrid approach?
About exchange rates, exchange rates for me is a second order issue in economic development. It's second order in the sense that in economics talk about first order condition and second order condition. So you need to meet the first order necessary, okay, before you now go to the sufficient condition, which is second order. Now, exchange rate management is only about monetary issues, and I regard that as nominal. The real thing here is that we need to grow our economy so that we're able to export. Okay, Professor Ken was talking about that industrialization, and that's what I was referring to, the things that we can do to be in the global value chain. Supposing that we are able to pump our gas to Europe, okay, you do not know what that will do to our economy. Suppose we are also able to maybe support systems such as Dangote's of this world so that we can have such turnaround in some other sectors, right? What would that do to our fiscal situation? Because it's only when we are taking control of that we can now begin to talk about exchange rates. You cannot manage your exchange rate, effectively or advantageously when you are challenged with imports. You are not exporting. Right? You can only export, you can only manage your exchange rate effectively and in a way that it insulates you against global volatility if you actually are exporting and your foreign reserve is growing, right? That is the only buffer you can have against exchange rate volatility. It doesn't matter what the central bank does or what the monetary planners do. Okay. If you're not building your export ability and competence, you're not driving an export-led economic growth, you cannot manage your exchange rate. It's as simple as that.
Okay. Let me come back to Professor Ken. Professor Ken, I hear what you and Professor Adi are telling, and it's all about providing for the people. To provide for the people, they must have jobs. To have jobs, you must have industrialization. To have industrialization, you must have, what do you call it now?
Buffers and transparency and
and also investors as well. To create that enabling environment for investors, they need a few structural things in place. For instance, there's power, agriculture, and also the red taping that goes around investing in Nigeria. With the reforms that Nigeria is making, well, we can see progress. But if we really want to retain investment, capital investment in Nigeria, and also encourage domestic investment, exactly what reforms must Nigeria take on head on first off, so that we can start this, start creating jobs for people in Nigeria? Professor Ken, please.
Yeah, well, I totally agree with Professor on what he said about the second order importance of monetary policy. See, you start from the known to the unknown. For example, Dangote has broken the chains without a doubt. Indorama is also doing well on the export of some of our plastic monomers and polymers. Now, these companies that have overcome the energy asymmetry and all the misalignments in the energy, build a cluster around them. If you look, I said that's why I keep saying to the minister, go and do a $50 billion ecosystem program around Dangote in Lekki. Dangote has 600 megawatts. It takes him only a marginal investment to have extra 100 megawatts for this cluster. And then all of them will be supplied and guaranteed their raw material for them to process, and they're all heading out to export. In Texas, you have 32 refineries and almost 5,000 petrochemical industries. Why can't you have 500 around Dangote and then do the same thing? There are all these companies that have their control of their energy and can do marginal expansion, can become a hub from which you can immediately move forward. When we were sworn in 2023, the Presidential Governing Council of Ministry of Finance Incorporated, I made the proposal. There are two companies that want to come to Nigeria on LNG, floating LNG. One is South Korea, the other one is Germany. They all wanted to invest $15 billion each, without the cost to Nigeria, give us prolific gas field offshore, and they'll come and do this, and they'll be giving us $20 million every day, $73 million a year. Two proposals, all of them competing with each other. I have pushed and pushed. I just gave up on that. Now let's move to the second bit. The second bit is that we know what we need to do for these companies to come in. The thing is the problem facing FDI. They are worried about the market conditions. They can't operate where you have this level of insecurity. Then they have raw material costs that are so exorbitant. Energy costs is pushing everything. I can't even process my cassava at this band A of 220 naira per liter. You can't make more money. But let's move to the third one, the policy. Now, the policy that the legal framework that governs borrowing, which is why I keep talking about fiscal inefficiency, is FRA 2007. What that law says is this: government can borrow to leverage the economic. They can, but under certain conditions. One, you must go for concessionary loan, which means usually around 3% or less. Two, you have to go for long-term loan, which means about 10 to 30 years thereabout. And then it says this must be for capital expenditure and human resource development. And when you come to capital expenditure, it's further explained is investment in infrastructure and in productive capacity. Then the other one on human resource development, we know what it is health, education, employment, and self-employment. It does not allow you to borrow money to share with anybody. It doesn't allow you to pay salary with money. It doesn't allow you budget support. It doesn't allow you to do all those.
Right.
Now he went further. Wait. He went further and says you must carry out cost-benefit analysis. Now this is where we have problem, because when the law says carry out cost-benefit analysis, it anticipates that when you are going to build infrastructure, you are going to be looking at economic corridors. If you are going to do rail line or power or anything, if you consider economic corridor, industrial corridor, commercial corridor, residential corridor, you consider those because that's where the revenue will come for you to maintain the infrastructure.
Professor Ken.
So these things are weak. We are not doing them.
Right.
And instead, we're mismatching our borrowing.
Professor
Ken.
That's
why it's inefficient.
Right. I hate to cut you, but we're pretty much pressed for time and we have to go. But very quickly, as we're talking about human capital and, increasing what's important when it comes to industrialization, we also have to talk about one key issue that we're leaving off of the table, and that was IMF's emphasis on stronger tax systems and closing the loopholes. Now, we've seen this administration when it comes to tax reform policy. And Professor Adi, you have raised concerns about that tax reform. Just to, hammer on this, can Nigeria really close that gap? Is IMF looking at the other indices that means closing the gap, which is low purchasing power and the weaker naira with Nigerians? Very quickly, because we're pressed for time. Professor Adi.
I don't want to speak specifically to IMF because sometimes I don't think that they are very much at home with the issues about Nigeria, okay? Because they just gather data here and there and then analyze it. That's not the story. The thing about the tax, so I said I have my reservation about the tax because if you need to look at it in vis-a-vis purchasing power, what will happen to our purchasing power? What has already happened? Purchasing power has moved from $2,000 almost to $800 today. So Nigerians have become poorer. So even the people who are being taxed more are people actually, if you consider, where they are coming from, they are not really poor. So it's just like taxing poverty. So that's going to worsen situations. But that be that as it may, it's going to transfer more money to the government coffers. But that's not the issue here. So see, what I'm interested in here, there's something I need to respond to, which is what Professor Ken said about building industrial clusters. The issue, so we should dwell less on this thing about the foreign direct investment. The investors we need to transform the economy are here with us. Okay, so we have domestic capital that could really transform this system if we really support them. Professor Ken said something which is very crucial: building industrial clusters around these who have done. So I want to dwell on what we can do to boost jobs, boost purchasing power. Actually, the way the exchange rate is today gives us that export advantage. So if we create more jobs here and enhance our productive capacity so that we're exporting, even if just to neighboring African countries, right? We are going to attract so much much into the system. Think about Japan.
Right.
This, in fact, where Nigeria is now when it comes to macroeconomic structure is exactly where Japan was when they were leading the whole country and running trade surpluses with every country. That's exactly where China is right now. China is running trade surpluses with all their trading partners. Why? Because of the, so relatively the renminbi or the Chinese currency is kind of devalued unilaterally, because they need to use that to really drive export competitiveness.
Right.
Now we need to now focus on driving competitiveness in the economy so that we will get the advantage. So I just don't want to talk about what hasn't happened or the negativities. There are so many positives if we can get our policies and our actions right.
All right. I mean, the reforms are kicking in January. That's the tax policy reforms. We wait to see the effect of that on the economy, the macroeconomics, and of course the inflation for Q1 of 2026. Mazino.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. Personally, I just think that you can tax reform all you want, but as long as Nigeria is not producing, then where exactly will the masses you're taxing get that money from you want so desperately? But thank you very much, professors, for being our first guests here on the show today. It's been very enlightening. Thank you indeed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's go to a short break, shall we? When we return, we switch gears and we talk security in Kogi State. After the break, stay with us.
Breakfast Extra, and our very first big report today takes us to Kogi State, where the fight against banditry has entered a new phase. In Kababunu local government area, security forces moved decisively. They demolished a hideout in Aheri Bunu forest, arrested wounded suspects, and unearthed makeshift clinics used by criminal elements. Here's a report filed earlier this week from News Central's Mono Balagbobo in Kogi.
We'll bring you that report in due time. But let's bring in Moina Balagbobo, who joins us live now from Kogi State. Also joining us is Stephen Okuri. He is a security consultant and strategic fellow at the Nigerian Army Resource Center. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you for coming on. Let's start with you, Mr. Balagbobo. Describing, just to talk to us about what you saw when you arrived at the camp, the layout of the camp, how remote was it, and the scale of the structure, but most importantly, what stood out to you with these operations?
Good morning, Mazino. Well, when we went to Eribunu in Kababunu local government area, like you mentioned, the community is very remote, way deep into the bush. At some points, our vehicles could not really go into the community. We had to actually walk for quite some distance before we got to the interior communities. This is an agrarian community. You could see tomatoes, pepper, and all of that. When we got there, what stood out to me was the fact that the locals of that particular community had already left due to the operations that the joint security forces in the state have been carrying out. And they showed us the particular spot where the particular hut, because these structures are actually huts. You have local farmers who are the ones actually inhabiting that particular community. So there are just a few huts around and then some farms. So these were some of the hideouts that some of these bandits were hiding, receiving treatment. We saw 2 of the bandits that were arrested. That was 6 days ago. So they brought them back. They showed us those bandits, and then they raided the whole place, destroyed the huts, burnt everything down, destroyed the farms. And I mean, it was just really, really amazing what happened. And another thing that stood out to me, Mazino, was the fact that the length with which some locals are going to cooperate with criminals is really alarming. Hello, Mazino, are you there?
Yes, we are here. We are here, Mona. Mona, it's a very interesting picture you paint regarding the remoteness of the community. But I'd like us to take that report so that we can have a very pictorial idea of what you're talking about here. So let's see that package that you sent in earlier in the week. And I'll be back to ask you and our guest a very interesting question after. Let's take that package.
After the arrest of suspected bandits receiving medical treatment in a remote forest community in Aheri Bunu, Kababunu local government area about a week ago, joint security forces once again stormed the community. So we are on our way to the particular community where bandits have been arrested, and according to the state security advisor, he says that the governor is clamping down on bandits. The area was reportedly deserted after arrests were made, as security officials say that the suspects were injured during previous encounters with government forces and had retreated to the community to receive treatment, prompting the state's swift response. So behind me are the faces of those who have been arrested. One out of the two suspects was found with gunshot wounds, allegedly being treated in the remote settlement.
And in picking them by our hunters, they came back to the community. They reported back to me, and which I reported to the governor, the head governor of Kogi State. And he directed that any house that criminals or bandits are being treated, we must demolish those houses.
That directive was carried out as huts and farm produce used by the suspects were set ablaze by the operatives. Officials say the aim is to eliminate all forms of logistical support for criminal gangs operating in the state.
We've been able to saturate everywhere that it is difficult to treat them inside the town again. And we are arresting, fake doctors or doctors that are treating them. We are not going to spare anyone perpetrating crime or criminality in Kogi State.
The state authorities have vowed not to spare anyone aiding banditry in the state, regardless of origin or affiliation, as security presence remains active in the area. In Kogi for News Central, Morno Balagbobo.
That's the package there from earlier in the week. Thank you very much, Mona Balagbobo, for such stellar report. Now, Mr. Akori, let me come to you. We've just seen that video. We've seen the kind of hideouts. In fact, it seems like a medical hideout where they're getting treated and all. And to first of reach these remote areas, it must have taken plenty of intelligence for the authorities to, first of all, gather and then effectively operate. And I'm wondering how significant these kinds of operations are when it comes to the efforts that they're putting in place. And not just that, how can Nigeria, with all its security infrastructure and structure itself, help to make these kinds of operations better, whether it's intel, whether it's community whistleblowing? What do they need to, perhaps support? What kind of support do they need? Mr. Corey, please.
Thank you for having me to give my perspective with regards to crime and criminality in Nigeria. Let me start by saying that conversation around crime and criminality is an ongoing one, right? And let me use this opportunity to appreciate or commend the governor of Kogi State, and also the special advisor to the governor on security matters or affairs. And also commend the troops. And also commend the citizens of that community that made or gave that information to the troops, and they acted on it. Now, I want to say that security operations or carrying or confronting or combating of security challenges is not for the military, the police, and the other security agencies alone, right? We, the civilian population, are also security managers, right? And the law enforcement agents are not ghosts. Just imagine that community that we saw in your report. It's not possible for a police officer or a soldier to be found in that community, or even a civil defense. Now, it is somebody from that community that gave out that information, and the police, the troop now acted on it with the effort of the governor and the special advisor to the governor on security. Now, you see, there's a lot of missing link when it has to do with addressing or combating security challenges. Number one, ineffective community policing, right? What is community policing here? It's a constant interaction between members of communities, rural communities, and the police and the military. If there's no interaction. You know, they will not be opportune or privileged to get that information that they got, right? And how well are security agencies, you know, engaging the communities in the event where they see something, they say something, and there's a channel that information that they get passes through and gets to law enforcement agents for them to act as quickly as possible. Now, this information got to the military and they acted on it, you know, and for us to succeed, which of course they have succeeded in this, they have to do with intelligence that is gathered locally. Crime is local, and the only way we can see how to address this crime is to also go local, right? So, for us to address it is the way to go, which of course they have done, and we expect this effort from other governors and other security advisors to governors. If you look at it, some other governors are not even acting the way this Kogi governor is acting. I want to use this opportunity to commend the Kogi state governor, right? Because some other special advisors are not known, they are docile, they are just there getting, being paid for services not being rendered from them, and they were appointed by governors based on their wealth of experience, because most of them are either retired military officers or police officers that are serving as special advisors on security to their various governors at different states, right? So for us as a country, we must see that there's effective community policing where members of the public have this confidence to give information to our law enforcement agents, right, for them to act. Because just like I said, it's not possible for them to be everywhere. So they must work with this information that comes from our local people that live in our rural communities.
But that's exactly it, that they must be confident enough to be able to take these informations to the police. First of all, it takes courage, it takes guts, it takes confidence in itself, in the structure that is on ground. What about reprisals? If there are reprisals, these people risk being eliminated by the very people that they're reporting to the police. Do they have that confidence in the system is one question. Another question is regarding the destruction of this unit that was found. Were it those houses? Didn't they belong to actual owners from before who had to leave because of the situation that they find their community? To burn these property, isn't that making it worse off for the actual owners? These are just questions that arose in my mind as you made your submission there. I don't know if you have any response to these.
Why not? You see, for us to tackle crime, we must do it head on, right? Members of the public must have confidence in our law enforcement agents. Most times, the confidentiality of informants, right, are given out by our law enforcement agents. So what our security agencies need to do, especially the police, they must see that they build that confidence, because there's already trust deficit that is already existing, right? So for them to see how to put that in place, you know, they must see that the confidentiality of informants is protected, because we have seen situations in this country where informants' identity became known to the criminal elements, and when at some point when they were released or when they are released, they go after these informants. How did they even get the information that Mr. X or B was the one that gave information about what they do, right? So police and the other security agencies must see that trust, confidence is built, right? Because as long as we find ourselves in a situation where information about informants are given out by law enforcement agents that are supposed to protect these informants, right? So we have seen situations like that. So that should be addressed, and I'm very sure that the hierarchy of the police and the other security agencies are looking at this in that regard. Now, when you see communities, when they see something and they refuse to say, it's as a result of fear, because we have seen situations where these criminals either pass these communities either on bikes or by foot. If they see these things, they become scared to pass this information to the police or the military. Because when these criminals get this information that it is this very particular community that gave out information about them when they were on transit, when they come back to this community to carry out attacks on them, we won't find the police or the military to protect them, right? So most times, these communities are in a fearful situation or condition to give out information about criminals that pass through their various communities. And that is what we need to do as government, because we need to see that effective community policing. Recall in 2018, during President Muhammadu Buhari's regime, when they wanted to kickstart the community policing initiative, 18 billion naira or so was released to that regard. Right. How far did that resources go? Right. So what I am saying invariably is that effective community policing, where citizens of the country will have confidence to give out information in the event when they see something that is suspicious within their community. But beyond that, which security agency do we have that their mandate is clear about generating information or generating local intelligence? Because the army, the police, most of them are alien to these rural communities, right? Because they are not conversant with the environment. They are not used to the terrain. They are not even used to the forest as well. And of course, you know the kind of value that these criminal elements attach to our forest. It is in the forest that they keep hostages. It is in the forest that after striking, they retreat into the forest, regroup, and come back and strike again, right? So which security agency do we have? Looking at all the security agencies that we have in.
Mr. Okori, we unfortunately have run out of time, if you can hear me. Mr. Stephen Okori is just a security expert. Also joining us is, also with us is Moina Balagbobo, who is our new central correspondent, who brought us the report from over the week. We must say thank you, gentlemen, for taking out the time to join us on the program this morning. Let's go on a short break, shall we? When we return, we'll bring you the news. Stay with us, don't go anywhere.
Now, every day, we hit the streets to get the perspectives of Nigerians on different issues that are happening. We've got a very interesting one here for our viewers this morning. Let's take a look at it. And when we get back, I and Judith will be having a short discussion on this. Take a look.
A whole lot has been going on in terms of politicians switching, especially to the APC party. It is not a good thing for Nigeria. As a matter of fact, Nigeria is in trouble because the APC government has not been, helping Nigeria in terms of the economy is in shambles, right? Okay, you cannot be working and they expect salary at the end of the month and they expect that salary, to do you when you factor in transportation, feeding and stuff. I get what I'm saying. So they have bastardized the economy.
They don't thief our money. Oshawa say whoever come to APC go, you see, they don't forgive them. So why are they decamping if they are actually fighting for the masses? Because they don't want people to, they don't want the coming government to probe them. So let me just save my face. That's why they are decamping. They have no reason to decamp. What are they decamping for? It's a shame.
Many, they are only leaving their party to another party because they can see what they are looking for. That is the corruption in this country. It's part of the corruption we are talking about. You understand? They don't want to help and build their own party. Not leaving because they see the progress in the other party.
Definitely it's for their personal gain. Most of them are already broke and they want to remain relevant. So that's the reason for the switch.
Politicians running to a party that have, make Nigerian standard of living to grow from this thing to worse. I don't know why.
When politicians leave their actual party that they develop from grassroots, then it amounts to greed. It amounts to greed because majority of them don't trust themselves, even in that party. But because this ASUU is straightforward in principle, in policy, that is why everybody is going to his party.
The masses elect you to represent them. Why are you decamping? Tinubu, that's why I love Tinubu, no matter how you say it. He stood like a man during the Obasanjo's era. He stood. That's why our governors, senators, representatives, and all decamping. They have no reason to do that. It's a shame.
We don't have good politicians. Politicians we have are those that are mindful of their pockets and probably their family's pocket. That's all. They don't have the benefit. They don't have the good of Nigeria in their mind.
They are not doing it for the favor of Nigerians. You understand? They are doing it for their own personal interests. just because they can see the progress in the other party. And they know that the party have a strength now. You understand? There is a trend in the party they are running to now.
Nigerian politicians are inconsistent. They don't really represent the people they pledge and took an oath to represent and serve. That is why you see them jumping from one party to the other.
I don't even pray for this government, for APC, to return itself in power. That will be ending 2032. So Nigeria will be enduring hardship from now to 2032. Is that what it means? No. It's not a good thing for Nigeria.
They are betrayers. They are not men. That's why I say very soon women will take over this country. Because our men they've messed up. I'm telling you the truth. The men you put, we need leaders, not rulers.
I will not support anybody that has switched party. Because even the vote itself, by the time people come out to vote, then you have problems of people taking money to the voting center to lure them to vote for them. And thereafter, you discover that people will start fighting.
They not get family. You say they get family, they're going to say, not because you're a fool. You have made your money. The people will put you there, that put you there to lead them. You reach there because you've made enough money, you jump. They are blasphemed. They are sinners. They need forgiveness. They need to be born again. This is not the Nigeria of our dream. It's a shame.
Any government from another party that jumped to the ruling APC party, what do you expect? It does not have any developmental agenda for the constituency or for the state. Are you getting me? So it's just like ruling Nigeria as an authoritarian, an authoritarian state, whereas we are in a democracy.
Perspective today on the current state of defections, especially from one party to another party. It's very specific parties this time. During the week, Enugu State Governor Peter Mbah actually defected, and this has caused a lot of concerns for people watching the political climate in Nigeria. What's going to happen exactly when it comes to 2027 elections? Is this strength for the APC, or does it actually show that defections might not mean that you're doing well, however, that you just might be amassing people with baggage, especially from the PDP? Also, who's left inside of the PDP? These questions are what Nigerians are concerned about, and that was what our perspective was about. In the studio, we'll be discussing this in another conversation. But first, I did say that you and I, Judith, were going to be talking about the fact that this has become an epidemic, let's face it.
All right.
And from earlier, remember when I asked you, does this mean that APC is this a show of strength for the APC? We're doing well, our reforms are working, and that's why we're attracting other politicians. What does this forebode for the APC? Of course, the PDP depleted. Is there any opposition left? And what does that say for democracy, for Nigeria, and the outside perception, the community, the international community? What do they think of Nigerian democracy? Interesting questions.
Very, very interesting questions. But anyway, to go in depth into this, we're joined by two guests. First, we're joining us live from Abuja is Dr. Sam Amadi. He's the director of Abuja School of Social and Political Thought, and we're also joined by Kunle Lawal, who's an executive director for the Electoral College. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. We appreciate you for coming onto the program this morning. Big issues, right? One of the respondents on our Vox Pop there said that Nigeria is slowly tipping to an authoritarian government. Now, over the week, we've seen 3 PDP governors move into 2025 and fresh exits this week as well. In your view, I have to ask Dr. Sam Amadi, is this a normal elite realignment for a systemic drift towards a one-party dominance? What are the guardrails that matter most right now as we're seeing this precedent and trend?
And good morning. First, I think 2 things. One is to say that perhaps this is a little bit more than the usual elite alignment, like you said. I mean, we've seen defection in previous republics, and since 1999, we've seen some major, movements. But we've not seen this degree of incumbents, especially governors, who don't seem to be much threatened leaving their party and then the ruling party. And so it might signal a growing, maybe destruction of the culture of politics and the rise of new one-party mentality. Now, the other problem is that we have formally have a multi-party system. So we're not a formal one-party state. We have, and INEC is still perhaps contemplating necessarily more parties, at least 18 political parties on the ballot. And INEC is thinking around increasing that number. So in a formal, if you're checking box, this is not a one-party state. But this is happening. One, the first thing is that we've seen perhaps people attribute to APC's dark acts. Maybe they say, oh, the APC is manipulating the process, Labour Party, PDP, linking them, stalling a PDP coherence. We saw that with Mbah. Mbah really worked hard to try to make the PDP. He fought over strategic interests of Southeast, his candidate, Sam Amadi, and he lost that battle. Whether that precipitated his exit is a different question. And also the notion that the lack of free and fair, the lack of faith, the loss of faith in the electoral system is the major instigator of this. Most of the people who are driving the campaign are persons who have no confidence in the electoral system. And we've seen that happen. We've seen 2023. We see people lose elections and snatch it through INEC and to the judicial system. So what this has created is not that APC is doing well. It's a fait accompli that, look, no win here. You're not going to win through this process. These shows are weak. INEC is captured, maybe will be retrieved, who hope so. The court has fallen, basically. And so if you are a politician who is not that courageous, who hasn't got that level of ethical commitment, you will be thinking in a Nigerian rational sense and says, what because of me? Now look at the kind of statement of what's going on in Abia, how the deputy speaker will say, I can't be number 6, and my state is not APC. And it's not thinking around, how do we message, how do we campaign? Is the guy there working? In every democracy, even the US, there are dead states. The other party knows that they're not going to win. Abia will look like a dead state for APC. But the APC leadership is gung-ho. They are very, say, look, we have to wrestle this out. So if you are weaker, a weak person in governor, if you don't have control, too much control of your environment, if you're not sure you are very popular, even though you're delivering the goods, you could be frightened that, look, ultimately these guys could write results. And we've seen that happen. So I think really, it's not like Nigerians are now want a one-party state, or like in Uganda or elsewhere where leadership are talking about movement. Let's develop ourselves, let's African communitarianism. We are one people. We don't need open. This is a default mode of a rigged, captured system where the electoral system is not reliable. And so the only answer would be that in 2027, if you have a free and fair election, and these guys with the camp lose, as they may likely lose, look, take, for example, Enugu, Mbah may be doing well, but he hasn't got political capital. He's not in control of that space that much. And so if he barely escapes, a PDP or Labour or any other party gives him a fight and defeats him, then that sends a signal. Look at what happened in the Delta in 2023. The former president, the former governor, was a VP and he lost to Peter Mbah. Now, if you have a re-election and it's free and fair, and in spite of the campaign, the governor loses, that will recreate the landscape. So people will now know, look, this feared federal might is not, that powerful. Tinubu fought the federal government. Maybe one would say it was under, suppose Tinubu is not Jonathan. It was under a much more tempered ruling party. And so that's really what is creating this crisis we have. It's a crisis of value and crisis of institutions, that we have no confidence in the electoral system, and therefore rational action would be to sign up to those guys who have the capacity to rig you out, and there's no consequence.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amadi. Dr. Amadi, very interesting submission there, but I'm going to come to Mr. Kunle Lawal now regarding this very interesting issue here. The APC says that, okay, it's because we're doing good, that's why we're attracting all these governors. So it would seem like they use this to measure their progress for them. But the PDP is depleting. Many people say it's because of the leadership issues and the court cases that they have regarding these leadership issues. But how much of a factor are the turmoils that the PDP going through in the entire dynamic here? Is it because of these issues that governors are leaving the PDP to the APC? And can we consider this an advantage for the APC? And what does it mean for 2027 eventually for both parties? Mr. Lawal.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. But I'd like to hinge my conversation on the first fact, which is we're trying to build a nation. We must be honest. I've seen about 4 election cycles. So it is clear that beyond reasonable doubt that there are no legacy parties in Nigeria. People are in parties because of the ambition of others, and they hope that winning, they could move forward. Somebody commenting earlier made a statement and said Tinubu was the man who fought and built his party and whatever. We don't have those kind of politicians. And these were the issues in intra-party dynamics that a lot of us have complained about coming earlier. And now it is clear that there's totally no rubric for what politicians can do or stand up for. It is all about winning the next election cycle. How is this critical to 2027? I think in 2027, there's going to be an implosion. And looking at it, everybody will probably join APC. I look at the 2027 election as going to be the elite against the masses. Governors can move. Doesn't mean 1 million votes have moved in one direction. It just means somebody notable has moved. When you look at the fact that, yes, our politics is financially based, then we can say, okay, this is a big problem. But what if in 2027, and just let's say presumably, Nigerians want a better Nigeria? This movement will totally not count in any direction. We saw that happen in 2015. All we just did is about the 50% participation in elections. And last time we saw that was 2015. And when we saw that a sitting government could not dictate the trajectory of how the elections went, and it could happen to the present incumbent party. I also do not clearly understand that when we discuss oppositions, or we're discussing opposition in Nigeria, we're only talking about PDP to APC. But maybe there are 17 other political parties. Why should we even hold that conversation? Looking at the PDP and its internal struggles, the PDP, I think, brought it on themselves. And what they're witnessing now is, of course, how would I call it, an avalanche of past sins. But coming down to the way opposition is supposed to, I've not seen opposition really in Nigeria, and I'll be honest. Opposition is supposed to be the conscience of the nation. Opposition is supposed to help, deliver oversight on the executive. Opposition is supposed to help teach the electorate that democracy is not a spectator sport. But what's happening right now is we just have people talking about coalitions, merger, this one has gone here, this one has gone there. So we've totally transcended in our culture of politics and the way we deal with things preceding 2027.
Okay, Dr. Amadi, let me quickly ask you, and let's look at the laws. There is murmurings that more governors are going to defect in the coming weeks. But legislators, let's look at the laws. Legislators who defect risk losing their seats under sections 68 as well as 109 of the constitutions when no division exists. But governors do not face the same explicit sanctions. So does this legal asymmetric, does it incentivize top-level defections, or does it weaken party discipline? Where is the line? Where does this line in all of this? And what does this mean about our laws? Dr. Amadi.
Yes, in the US, yes, as a largely, we copied our democracy from the United States. And there, defections are allowed. You don't lose your position because you defected. And that's a conceptual problem for here in Nigeria. The Supreme Court has argued that, parties canvass for votes based on the Constitution. And they read it to mean that the people vote for the party and not the candidate, which I think the Supreme Court is wrong. The fact that parties are the ones who sponsor candidates do not mean that people don't vote for candidates. But that's what the Supreme Court has said. So the implication of that constitutionally is that when you're a governor, then we can assume that the people who voted for PDP or APC or LP or whichever party are not OT or Mbah or Shashamu. So that's the crisis of conception here. But if you ask me, I think that the governor should leave the offices because they defect. I think perhaps the conditions like Kunle pointed out that leads to defection underscores the fact that our political culture is not developed. In the Second Republic, we had PDP, NPN and other, NPP, NPN and other, UPN, than JNPP. Then did you see that kind of defection? Because the parties people came together, developed a vision, and they were able to fight on that vision. And maybe because the parties then were somewhat geopolitically located, so they were strong in geopolitical zones and they existed that way. But the problem is that we should not solve a political crisis through a legal means to say, okay, once you leave, yes, it will be punitive. I may stop that tide, but it's going to, for example, a political party adopts a different ideology or their tendency moves against what the people in the state voted for. They voted for this guy who's going to invest in primary education and all that, and in school, the party tends towards a much more neoliberal economic policy that's difficult for him, and he switches party. So I don't think you should necessarily say lose position. What we should do is to work hard to make parties to represent something. And that's why people talk about a two-party system de facto. Babangida tried it by law. A two-party system whose, even in the US, there are people forget that in America, there are many parties that have no chances, at least for a period of time, or something different happens. And the two parties create that kind of centralizing force and coherence, so that you're either this or that. And even within the parties, you see splitters, you see some moderate, extremist, progressive wing, but they're in one party. I think this is a moment for us to focus again on how do we ensure that we build a political party that's strong. And again, if elections are free and fair, and that's really what I care about, and a governor or somebody now defects, contrary to the prevailing views of people in that constituency, they can use a referendum to get the person out if you're a legislator. Or the second time they vote you out. I think the biggest crisis is that our politics is not competitive.
Okay.
There's a lot of capture.
Dr. Amadi.
People themselves are mobilizing. Yeah.
Dr. Amadi, very interesting that you should put it like so. Politics in Nigeria is not competitive. Mr. Lawal, thank you very much for actually raising the fact that there's not just one opposition, but 17 other parties that we should consider. Let's take a break, gentlemen. We are still coming back to have this broader conversation regarding opposition. Is defection the only way to go when it comes to maintaining political relevance in Nigeria as regards opposition? What about coalition? Let's take that break and we'll be back. I'll be asking you gentlemen that question. We'll be back. Welcome back as we discuss the future of opposition in Nigeria, as over the week we've seen a slew of defections from governors to the APC. We have two gentlemen here, Dr. Amadi and Mr. Lawal, who have been speaking with us on the topic about opposition and how rampant it's becoming and whether Nigeria is practicing true democracy at the end of the day as we move towards 2027 elections. Now, gentlemen, before the break, I had asked, what about coalition? If we're seeing defections at this rate, we have also seen big players, suggest coalition as a means to fight for opposition. Atiku Abubakar, for one, Peter Obi, we heard so much about this a couple of months ago, but let's be honest, we are hearing less and less of the ADC or coalitions generally. So I'm wondering, why are coalitions less talked about or less preferred by governors or by politicians? Why does it seem that defection seems the only way to go? And what does this portend for Nigeria? Dr. Amadi, I'd like you to go first.
Why are we not seeing less of it? At the beginning, it was when ADC was launched, it came with fanfare. People were, there was a momentum. And I think largely because the obedience were a lot more committed to that project. Peter B and Atiku and others have not started speaking some kind of language of dissonance. But down the line, because of too much focus on the politics, the zero-sum politics of who is on the ticket of ADC, I think they lost the plot, in my view. If you watch what happened in 2015, the idea was to, damage Jonathan, big media blasts, and Jonathan got, submerged in those narratives. And so there was really a consensus, together with a public, public policy, public opinion, NGOs, kind of, this is not working. You just need to move out Jonathan. And Buhari was presented as an alternative, clarity, in terms of weak, strong, even though history proved different. That was clarity that mobilized a strong focus on alternative to PDP, and that was the APC. This time around, that clarity is missing. The founders and the proponents of this of coalition are all driving a different way. So zoning is an issue, no clarity on it. Who is the right guy that will take on Tinubu? Who is a clear alternative? No clarity. Atiku wants to be president, Peter wants to be president, maybe Amechi wants to be president. And so this lack of coherence and coming together to first define the problem and define the solution and fit the person to that solution is why there's no traction. So even if, although in the north, people are decamping to ADC, a few activities, but there's no groundswell like we saw in 2015, and that's really a problem. So if elections will hold in 2016, as they're saying, then you probably will not have a strong coalition. Some candidates may be strong, depending on what happens, but that's the problem.
Okay, then, Dr. Amadi.
They didn't have that clarity of messaging and symbolization.
Thank you, Dr. Amadi. Because we're out of time, I'd like to hear Mr. Lawal's submission here. Mr. Lawal, defection versus coalition, how does that affect voter reaction?
Well, for me, defections and coalitions do not really affect Nigerians' voters. Yes, it affected once in 2015, but it hasn't shown any general change in behavioral patterns. And I'll tell you why it isn't really. No standard party, regardless of which is being defected to or which is being defected from, can claim to have 500,000 members paying dues in the political party. Because of this absence or this void of party members, which are staunch, who believe in ideology, it's just like a simple rotation that's constantly going around. So, like I said, and like Dr. Amadi rightly put, I also too don't think that governors should be taken out of office because they defected from the party. I don't think that should be. I think that travails on democracy. But this only exists, and these defections only exist because our parties are empty. You don't have staunch party members. You don't have people that are working for a party. Our intra-party mechanisms are poor. Our intra-party constitutions are weak. And that has given birth to the position. I've run for office before, so it's clear for me to understand critically the problems, even when you're trying to blame parties. The truth is parties demand more from politicians. So parties just exist or thrive on the ambitions of a particular or in the individual or individuals.
Right.
So a party does not have a direction. And, when you look at it, it now comes into coming into voter recognition of a coalition or a defection. Right. It doesn't really change the way things are in voter reaction.
Mr. Lawal, I do have to ask you, right? You pointed out two things. You said that the parties are weak, hence why we're saying the defections, and that the parties demand a lot from the politicians themselves. And then secondly, you talked about whether defections or no defections, it doesn't detect voter decisions at the end of the day. And so one has to look at our reforms, right? As we've gotten a new chairman who's going to be at the helm of affairs for INEC. What can we do? Because these defections in some way, to me, signals early campaigning, so to speak, when you think about it. And before Mahmoud Yakubu resigned from his position, they also did raise concerns about this early voters, early campaigning that we're seeing. We've seen the body language of all the defections, but also the structure of it from local level to appointees, entire cabinets changing their colors to the APC. What kind of reforms are we supposed to be looking at now? What should be at the forefront of discussions when it comes to our reforms ahead of 2027 and beyond 2027?
I think the first one that's key, which I've heard the new INEC chairman, Professor Amuchan, mention, was developing an electoral offences commission. I think this is critical. One of the things, well, an electoral offences is wide, from early campaigning, which Nigeria is guilty of, or we have started playing fully within, campaign finances. You know, it limits, so the Electoral Act limits how much everyone can spend, but it doesn't give jurisdiction or power who to prosecute such an offense. I think this is very critical, because if we do not cut down campaign financing, then the right people cannot run for office in Nigeria, because the expenditure is large. The limit for running for president is 5 billion. Most candidates in the so-called overgrown parties exhaust that particular amount before primaries. Automatic transmission is key. I don't think it should be electronic transmission. I mean, it should not be something that INEC has a choice over, so that you could say INEC could do this, you know, as it is in law. What it should be is it should be mandatory that we use electronic transmission. And for me, I think the whole structure of political party, there's something I also do not get with political parties. I've been in a political party with an internal position, and I do not understand how parties run multiple primaries, and INEC is aware of 4 primaries, and courts have to. So I think we get courts out of our elections because it's not supposed to happen in a functional democracy. Then we have one of the biggest problems. We'll continue to have big problems within politics and within our electoral laws and etc.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. We wait to see how the ballooned APC will turn out in a couple of months. All the big wigs from every party is going in. There's only one thing, you got to satisfy everyone. And let's see if the promises that have been made will be delivered in the coming cycle. Gentlemen, thank you so much, Dr. Sam Amadi, as well as Kunle Lawal. Gentlemen, I want to say thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Well, let's go on a short break. When we come back, we'll switch gears to education. ASUU is on strike, and the government has said no work, no pay. After the break, stay with us.
Welcome back. It's still Breakfast Extra here. Another conversation coming your way. Nigeria's public universities are again on pause. The Academic Staff Union of Universities declared a 2-week total and comprehensive warning strike starting on Monday, October 13, 2025, over long-standing issues with pay, funding, and also implementation of agreements. Now, federal officials say dialogue is open and have asked vice-chancellors to file compliance reports until, or rather while unions insist the core promises remain unmet. Now, students are caught in the middle. What exactly is new this time, and what will it take to end the cycle? Well, let's go to our correspondent, Sumaya Abubakar, with a roundup of campus compliance, the key demands on the table, and the government's response. Here's her report.
At the University of Abuja, the Federal University Lokoja, Kogi State, and several other campuses nationwide, the level of compliance with ASUU strike directive varies. While some faculties appear shut, others remain open. Classes are still in session as members of other unions say they are not part of ASUU and will continue academic activities.
We have 3 different academic unions. We have KONWA, we have NAMDA, and then we have ASUU. If ASUU decided there are other academic unions that are functioning, I'm not on strike. We are not on strike. And we have already sent message to our students. Our students are very much around.
For students, the situation remains uncertain. Across campuses from Abuja to Lokoja, reactions to the new strike are mixed, with frustration, confusion, and even sympathy for lecturers' demands.
As we speak, we don't know the state of the situation, whether they are going on, whether ASUU is going on strike, or they are not going on strike. But what I want to say is this affects us grossly, you understand? So the federal government should do their own part to ensuring that the demands of ASUU is met. And aside that, also, ASUU should also consider the students.
I'm already scared enough because I'm losing 5 years in school already. So I feel this strike, it is going to really add a lot of things to me, which is not something I'm actually scared of.
The federal government has invested billions in the NEL fund loan, and students have actually used this as a means to pay school fees. So I don't feel like the federal government should give out such amounts of money to students to pay school fees and then end up sitting at home due to ASUU strike. So the federal government should also try to meet the demand of ASUU so the student can actually remain in session.
It's happening. Well, thank God I just graduated and it's not going to affect me really. So I'm happy, I'm okay.
The federal government calls the strike unnecessary, insisting the no work, no pay rule stands. ASUU, however, says talks have yielded no real progress, leaving uncertainty across public campuses. In Abuja, for News Central, Sumaya Abubakar.
Sumaya Abubakar there. Thank you for that report. Now, she joins us live on the program, joining us live from the capital, Abuja. Also joining us is Dr. Peter Ogudoro, who is an education researcher and leader, Nigerian teachers community. Lady and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Let's start with you, Sumaya Abubakar. You filed in that report, right? And I do have to ask you about, the full compliance, whether partial compliance, and the various associations, whether it's ASUU, KONOA, what does this mean for you, just filing that report? What does this say about the uniformity of our education curricula and the academic year across our campus and faculty?
And also good morning, Doctor, for joining us. I'll tell you that I saw a lot of people that does not align with ASUU in the university system. For the first time, I would say in years, because I know way back while we were in school, in university, it was ASUU that are the dominating union in this, our universities. But now, this sector came out, that's the KONOA, which was a break away from the ASUU. Now, these are, of course, academic staff that do not agree with too much strike. They're saying let's strike and let's just get the school working, let's get the student in school. So we were able to talk to, a member of that union, and right there what I noticed was that the ASUU members, that's the lecturers in Abuja University, were not willing to talk. And there was a bit of back and forth between these lecturers, making fun of each other, saying that, you cannot talk, but then I can. And these other lecturers, not just that, we have medical association, also lecturers saying that school is in session, and for them, they are going to continue. They have their plans and everything. But then, aligning it with the curriculum and then the school, students are devastated, talking about how much they have missed in, previous strikes, and then now this is happening again. So far, of course, it's not really looking good. But for universities that ASUU is the dominating union there, of course, everything has been shut down. But for universities that have other unions, then things are ongoing, and according to the student there, they say they feel bad for their classmates or coursemates that cannot attend school because their lecturers are the one on strike. So it is for the first time there's so much division, I'll tell you, and it's, for me, I feel like it's not really a lost case. Because we're already getting people to pull out from one session to another, and it's just like a case of perhaps there are two sides, to this coin. But meanwhile, the discussion and negotiation is still on the table between the federal government and the lecturers. And they seem to be stubborn, I would have to add that, both parties.
All right, thank you very much, Sumaya. Let's come to Mr. Ogudoro. Mr. Ogudoro, thank you for joining us. You are an education researcher, so I'm very sure that you can give us the answer to this question. The 2009 FG-ASUU agreement and the renegotiations keep coming up every single time. So I'm wondering, as a researcher, could you give us maybe what the best plan is, the best staged implementation plan to resolve this issue could be. And let's give a timeline to it. Let's say 18 months. What would your answer be?
We know that we have embarrassed this country enough by not doing the needful. When we are teaching our young people the wrong things, we should know that keeping agreements is one of the things that make us human beings who can be trusted. Integrity is key if you want to run a society successfully. And those of us who do research in the social sciences, we know that trust is one of the elements that guarantee successful society. So societies where you can't trust the people you are going into relationships with are societies that also generally don't do very well. And I think it's something that has afflicted us over the years as a people. And so people tell you X and they do Y. The government has, for more than a decade now, been telling us to X and doing Y. And that's certainly not good for us. And what ASUU members are asking for is not something that is unreasonable. They are saying you should pay them well. They are saying the salary you have already agreed to pay, you should deliver it, and at the right time. They are saying that if you give them an important assignment that requires them to stand in classrooms and teach, you should give them the tools to be able to do that. Those tools include giving them reagents, chemicals that they can use to train their children, especially those in STEM. They are saying you should equip their laboratories for them to be able to produce graduates who are globally competitive. Now, none of this we are doing, and government officials, especially the politicians who run the system, what they have succeeded in doing is to see if they can weaken us by getting other unions to come into the system. And that's what you're seeing in a place like University of Abuja. But dividing us is not going to provide a permanent solution to our problem, because given the fact that this problem has lingered for over a decade, we have very significant effects that are not good for our country. And what are those effects? Those effects include the fact that brain drain within the university system has become very endemic, embarrassing, scandalous, and very challenging for our country. In the last 2 years, we have probably lost up to 300 professors to the Western world, Europe and North America. And this is a country that is poor. We haven't got the kind of money it takes to actually produce professors. And the few we produce, we have let them go. And we are suffering the same thing in the health industry. The doctors we have used as scarce resources to train, we are letting them go. And we pretend that we don't need competent doctors. We pretend that we don't need professors who understand what the world is talking about. We are not behaving well as politicians. Look at how much we spend on our parliamentarians. How many parliamentarians would we have? We don't have up to 500 members of the House.
So, Mr. Ogudoro, what would it be like if we were to design, from all the background that you've given us, all the challenges that the Nigerian education system has with the Nigerian government, what would that implementation look like? What would that plan be like to help remove the effects of these disagreements that we are seeing, these points that you've noted?
For a start, as a government, we need to accept that education is indispensable for national development. We need to get a philosophy of education for ourselves. We need to make it something that everybody in the public space, especially the policy formulators, accept that without education, we can't get it right now with respect to our politics. We can't grow our economy, and we cannot join the rest of the world with respect to technology. So we need to first put it on the table and get all the public officers to accept that position, that education is the bedrock of development. Once we accept that, then it becomes easy for us to convince those who do appropriation to send more money in the direction of education. As we speak today, we are not budgeting up to 10% of our national resources, and devoting it to handling education projects, and that's not good for us. So let's fund education well. Let's put machines that we need to be able to produce good engineers. Let's give reagents to people who teach chemistry and biology. Let's also ensure that we promote good governance within the university system. As we speak today, interlopers have come into the place and they are destroying the system.
Right.
By interlopers, I mean people who shouldn't actually have any business in running universities, and the ones who head departments, who are vice chancellors, politicians pretending to be academics. And this is not good for us. We can't continue like this and get a country that will move forward.
Mr. Ogudoro, let me come in there as you're talking about the staff body itself. We've seen, and our correspondent Sumaya just raised that, for the first time, maybe in history, we've seen a divide in what used to be a unified stance against the government when it comes to the demands and the welfare of academic staff. With these different bodies that have sprung up, whether it's KONOA or others, and ASUU itself, would it coming up? Do you think that this will mean real change for the educational system, or are this saboteurs in quotation?
Yeah, of course, the majority of academics in the Nigerian university system belong to ASUU. It's not KONOA they belong to. They see this emergence of KONOA as a political tool in the hands of politicians to divide ASUU in order to break their spirit and discourage them from calling for industrial action in the future. But if you divide them, it doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't remove the fact that our university system is not adequately funded. The laboratories are not there. Our engineers are not globally competitive. So putting your energy as a government into dividing ASUU is amounts to cutting your nose to spite your face. And that's a very, unreasonable way to try to solve a national problem, especially when that problem has to do with education. And then you have to look at the consequences of creating this kind of confusion in the university system. Reasonable people who have gone to proper schools and they are happy to contribute to national development by running classrooms, producing young people who can become engineers, medical doctors, pharmacists, etc. Are people who look at what is happening and say, no, this is not the kind of environment that we're looking forward to working in, and then leave the shores of our country. And that's what is happening now. There's hardly any week you don't find up to 50 young people who are very smart, leaving the country to go and practice in Saudi Arabia, in Europe, and North America. So we shouldn't put our energy as a government into dividing ASUU, because that is not the way forward. The way forward is to recognize the problems that have brought us to where we are and take a systematic approach to resolving those challenges. And we shouldn't, be looking for people who are in our camp and those who are against us, and then trying to decimate those who are not in our camp. This is a common problem that afflicts Nigeria as a country, and we need to get involved by way of harnessing our energies and looking for consensus. And that consensus should recognize that indeed, where we are is not a pretty place. The average Nigerian child who finishes university education today, for example, as an engineer, is not able to get into US, America, Germany, the Netherlands, and function as an engineer. They can't cope because they have not been properly trained. They know this themselves. The professors are complaining that they are ashamed of the people they are producing. Wow. Starting from our own shores here, Dangote, when he was building his refinery, when he was building a cement factory, go and ask him. Up to 70% of the people who helped him to build those places, he brought them in from outside the country. And that is because our university system is not producing the kind of people we need to be able to make our economy function optimally. Okay. And so we need to do everything. We shouldn't play politics with education, because once you try to play politics with education and you succeed in doing that, yes, you might be able to divide ASUU, but if you divide ASUU and destroy the system, you definitely have, cut your nose, and then you have succeeded in spiting your face, and that's very problematic.
Thank you, sir. Sumaya, let's come back to you. Sumaya, since after the report, I'm wondering what you've heard in terms of maybe agreements. Are there any written drafts being offered, or are there any concrete agreements, or maybe anything that you've heard since regarding the Education Ministry and ASUU?
On Monday, which was the first day of the strike, where we were at University of Abuja, I spoke with the president of ASUU, but he told me at that time that he was in at the Senate. So later on, we discovered that he, the representative of the ASUU and himself included, were in the Senate to discuss with the committee there in charge of education, talking about addressing this and bringing it to a halt. And based on what we heard, there was no the resolution there rather was just about, the federal government should meet with ASUU in order to address this issue. So, of course, that meeting was held. It happened on Thursday. And News Central was the only one that could get the location of this meeting. So we were there on ground. It was a closed door session. When they came out, it was just few members. Of course, the leadership were not there. It was just few members representing ASUU there. And when we approached them to talk to them about what happened, they say that there is nothing to say now because this is just the beginning of the negotiation. For them, this was just laying, on the ground what they demand, and the federal government would go and come back with answers. So basically that was the only thing they gave, and when I insisted on more, they said they are not even at the liberty to talk except for the leadership of the ASUU, which I noticed members don't just come out to say what exactly is happening except if it's the leadership alone. So basically that was what we were able to get from that, and we asked if at all this is going to take long, like what should be the expectation of parents and students in terms of the resumption. And they say that is not on their camp. That is a decision of the federal government when they need their demand. But according to them, they are already tired with the same thing over and over again, and they demand real decisions and real actions. And also, I would say that still on that Monday, going back to that Monday, we saw the Minister of Education, Tunji Adausa, come out to address a part of this, where he said that when President Bola Ahmed Tinubu came into office, there was an agreement with the union. That is according to, of course, the Minister of Education, saying that the agreement was that the president was going to pay part of that 2009 agreement, just half of it, not in its entirety. But according to him, he said right now ASUU has demanded more, even after there's been at least some numbers of changes by the president that he gave into that particular agreement that they made. So there seems to be a lot of confusion back and forth. There is no clarity, and from the both camp, Nigerians don't really know the exact details of what is going on. They seem to be a bit shying away from telling Nigerians what is going on. So I would say, even from the journalist side, there's a bit of frustration of if we were fighting for the same thing for our academic schools, for our schools to work, because Nigeria, based on the global ranking, have nothing to show for it.
Okay,
so
then,
if at all we are working towards the same thing, then it should, the consensus.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed, Sumaya, it is rather frustrating, especially from a journalistic point of view. If you are lacking that information, if you can't get it, then you can imagine what the masses feel like, especially the students who are caught in the eye of the storm. Sumaya Abubakar, thank you very much for such stellar reporting. And Mr. Peter Ogudoro, thank you very much for bringing your expertise to bear here in this conversation. We're going to end it here because we've got the headlines coming up, and we've got more conversation in our final hour for Breakfast Extra.
Good morning. You're watching News Central here. It's time for us to bring you breakfast headlines. I am Judith Atibi. And we'll begin the news in Abuja, where the United States Embassy has issued a security alert to American citizens ahead of a planned protest in the Federal Capital Territory. The protest, tagged #Free Nnamdi Kanu Now, is scheduled for Monday, October 20th, and is expected to take place at the Eagle Square and the Central Business District, with a possible match towards the presidential villa. The U.S. Embassy warns that the protest could lead to disruptions or violence and advises its citizens to avoid protest routes and limit movement around Abuja. Meanwhile, the Federal High Court in Abuja has thrown out an appeal by the Nigerian police force to stop the planned #Free Nnamdi Kanu Now protest. The police, acting on orders from the Inspector General of Police, Kayode Egbetokun, filed an ex parte motion to halt the protest organized by activist Omoyele Sowore. but Justice Umar declined to issue a restraining order and adjourned the case to Tuesday, October 21st for a full hearing. Traore has hailed the decision as a win for civil liberties, vowing that the protest will go ahead as planned. There are strong indications that some names may be removed from the recently approved presidential pardon list following public backlash over the inclusion of certain high-profile and violent offenders. In a press statement, the Attorney General's office confirmed that the list approved by the Council of State and presented by the Attorney General of the Federation, Lateef Fagbemi, is still under final review. The pardon was intended to decongest prisons and promote national reconciliation, but critics argue that some individuals listed do not deserve clemency. Meanwhile, human rights lawyer Femi Falana has called on the federal government to withdraw and re-examine the list of 175 persons recommended for pardon by President Bola Tinubu. In a statement he issued on Thursday, Falana did not dispute the president's constitutional power to grant pardons, but said the exercise should be reviewed in the interest of what he termed justice and national morality. He argued that the current list includes politically exposed persons, alleged drug barons, armed robbers, terrorists, and people convicted of state offenses such as culpable homicide and murder, and therefore requires urgent reprisal. President Bola Tinubu has met with Masad Bolos, the senior advisor to U.S. President Donald Trump on Arab and African affairs, to discuss growing cooperation between Nigeria and the United States. The talks focused on joint efforts to combat terrorism and enhance stability in the region. Bolos said both countries are stepping up intelligence sharing, training, and technical support. He emphasized the importance of tackling extremist threats and securing maritime routes in the Gulf of Guinea. He also addressed recent claims in the U.S. about religious persecution in Nigeria, clarifying these reports do not reflect official American policy.
Doing together, there's information sharing, there's technology, there's training. There are quite a few programs that we've worked on and we will continue to work on, but hopefully we can increase, we can increase that. We know that also Nigeria had recently purchased some equipment from the United States, and we hopefully will work towards the terrain well, know that terrorism has no color and no religion and no tribe. People of all religions and all tribes are dying as a result of terrorist acts, but it's very unfortunate. We even know that Boko Haram and ISIS are killing more Muslims than Christians. So people are suffering from all sorts of backgrounds. This is not specifically targeted about one group or the other. However, any loss of life is too many. One is too many.
These people have been sentenced to 3 years in prison for participating in banned protests ahead of next week's presidential election. Tensions are rising as opposition figures Lauret Gbagbo and Tijani Tayam have been barred from contesting against the incumbent president, who is seeking a fourth term despite a government ban on demonstrations. Protesters have taken to the streets in Abidjan and other towns demanding fair participation in the October 25th polls. Amnesty International has condemned the crackdown, calling for the release of detained protesters and urging authorities to respect civil liberties. And away from Ivory Coast and now to Guinea-Bissau, as the country's main opposition coalition and its historic Pan-GC party have been barred from contesting the upcoming November 23rd presidential and legislative elections. The Supreme Court released a final list of eligible candidates and parties on Friday, confirming earlier provisional rulings that cited late application submissions. The former Prime Minister of the country, who leads both the opposition party and the coalition, opposition coalition, and that's Pai Tara Ranka, was disqualified after switching candidacy platforms, both of which failed to meet court deadlines. The coalition, made up of about 10 political parties, has now been ruled out of both the presidential and legislative races, raising concerns about the opposition's rule in the upcoming elections. And also the breakfast headlines we can take at this hour. Let's go on a short break. Afterwards, the Breakfast Extra continues. I'm Judith at TV, and thanks for watching.
Good morning again and welcome. The presses are back in and we have the dailies for this morning. So we're going to be spending the next couple of minutes looking at the front pages, seeing what headlines are making big news and what you should expect to hear from today's papers. Judith is with me. Of course, we'll be having these conversations together. Let's find out together what exactly is making the mills turn around, shall we, Judith?
Yeah, let's do that.
We're starting from This Day newspaper this morning. Very big rubrics here. Let's see. 2027, of course, what do you expect? Defections shake PDP LP ADC as opposition fights to remain competitive. We have had this conversation today. Makinde only defection that matters is when hunger leaves Nigeria. Suit against PDP convention. Court document reveals NWC, National Working Committee, approved Chris Uche's appointment as legal representatives. So the PDP's woes are myriad, if you ask me. Apart from the internal wranglings about leadership, then they have to consider whether they still have confidence in their own people, the governors especially, as we see the mass exodus leaving the PDP to the APC. Why not other parties? Why not perhaps coalition? If you missed that conversation that we had, you'll find it on YouTube, so perhaps you should go back and see. At the top for This Day newspaper, in Washington, D.C., Cardoso, Uzoka, Anite rally global backing for Nigeria's reforms. Say tax reforms to unlock fiscal space, spur infrastructure investments, join creation. What about industrialization? Big question there. It's just two big headlines. At the side here, however, Trump's advisor dismisses religious persecution allegations in Nigeria. So, Judith, I knew we were going to come to that. So the observers have come. They've said, okay, it's true. There weren't that many killings of Christians in Nigeria. In fact, it was more Muslims. So the talk about it being a Christian genocide kind of like loses water. Remember last week during the monologue, I said this about the South African instance where I noted that they had such a situation about the white farmer genocide, and that fell apart when the facts didn't, match up. We also have that here. But I also suspected that there was going to be some sort of resistance if the information came out that there isn't such a thing as Christian genocide in Nigeria. And that headline there just proves the point I was trying to make. There is defiance from the Trump camp telling, oh no, come on, there must be something. Let's find something. Let's find something. And to that I ask, why are you so interested? But if you put together 1 and 2, you'd understand exactly what their interests are.
Right. Like I said, last week I was saying that when you look at when this accusation started to spring up, it was just around the time when the vice president made that as address at the UNGA and also proclaimed the statehood of Palestine and called for the end of genocide in Palestine.
1 and 2.
Then, so if you can add 1 and 2, I mean, let's just address the elephant in the room. But most importantly, two truths can coexist. There are killings.
Oh yes,
Christians
that's definite.
are there, right? But there's also a matter of insecurity, right? And I think that we need to separate the two. There are killings in the north. We've seen targeted attacks to communities that are predominantly Christian, but there's also the part of there is a huge issue of insecurity
How do we separate
that is touching, so two truths can coincide, in my own humble opinion. And so as we are tackling the issue of insurgency, let us not forget that there's radicalization in the north as well.
So I totally agree with you.
Yeah, so that's my own worry.
Well, the main thing is, if you're going to identify these two things and stand by it, then give them proper names.
Yes.
Without the names, you cannot tell the international community, this is what we're suffering from. They will help you diagnose it and give it a name for you. And obviously, you won't be happy with it. But that's for This Day newspaper.
Right.
Let's see what else we have.
Yeah, absolutely. It's still defections that are happening over there. Let's go to Saturday Vanguard, shall we? At the very top of the headmask there, Enugu Mbah loud on 200 projects. You can find that story on page 11. It goes on to say, defends defection to APC, says Southeast so fragmented. If it were about personal interest, I wouldn't leave PDP. My goal is to make Enugu best state in Nigeria. Why didn't you do that in the last years you were governor? Why is it now when you're switching to the APC? But again, I digress. And away from that to health. Mental health experts warn Nigeria is in a silent emergency, say national response to suicide is weak. You can find this story on page 4. Below the headmaster, Yoruba royals split over burial traditions. You can find the story on page 25. Kings should not be butchered like animals after death. And that's from Oluwo of Iwo land. It's unacceptable to abandon tradition for foreign religion. That's Deji of Akure land. Step aside if you won't practice our tradition, Oluwo of Owo tells monarchs. And finally, we are ready to fight to defend the soul of our heritage. And as traditionalists, you can find that story interesting there from page 25. At the top there, a beautiful nonsense. Questions for President Tinubu. I'm sure that's an op-ed there for the Saturday Vanguard. You can find the story on page 15. Right next to his Editors Shift annual conference to November 11th to 14th. Tinubu to attend. That story is on page 7. Sanwo-Olu launches E41M. That's the Omi Eco electric ferry service. That story there is on page 3. At the bottom, World Bank meeting, Africa must finance Africa, Lumelu, IMF to Nigeria, strengthening reforms, mobilize domestic revenue for growth. We had that discussion right here on the program. If you missed it, you can always catch it up on YouTube, but find this article on page 6 of the Saturday Vanguard. And lastly here, for insecurity revealed 270 enclaves of tourist bandits in Nigeria. That story is on page 9. Criminals seize the country's forests, creeks, highlands, and tragic tales of blood, tears, lamentations from north to south. That story is on page 9 on the Saturday Vanguard.
There's one on mental health at the top there that I found very interesting. Experts warn Nigeria is a silent emergency. What's contributing, of course, is the state of things in Nigeria. How's your mental state? How are you coping? It sounds like a question. 5 years ago, it would sound like an insult to ask somebody that. But if you ask a person that now, you're actually showing genuine concern. Because whether you like it or not, if you ask me, I'd appreciate it. It's not been easy with the economic situation and the doom and gloom and woes that we're hearing every single day on the news. And as journalists, it does take its toll on you because you are the very person who's giving those information day in, day out, researching it, finding out the details of it, and you're at the forefront. So it's a good call.
Right, but also as journalists, it also gives you foresight, right? Because then as you're analyzing, you can see a trend and you can see a pattern. The more you look, the less you see. But we're seeing even more, So when we see repeated patterns, it also breaks your heart because it's like we want to change more than Nigerians do because we're tired of resounding the same, rhetorics over and over again. So it's even more exhausting.
Saturday Nation this morning. Now let's take that one. Headlines there. First big one: genocide. Boko Haram, ISIS killing more Muslims than Christians. Trump advisors say. Says U.S. satisfied with Tinubu's handling of former herder conflicts, pledges support. So initially last week when we had a delegation that were sent to clarify on the matters in Nigeria, many people queried and said, is that what you should be doing? But I thought that was actually a good endeavor by the government because you need to send representatives to create the clear picture. So regarding that, kudos to the government. It was a good effort. Key ADC members to join APC soon, says Yield Wata. Party strong enough to manage the effectors' expectations, say O2. And right under that, withheld LG funds, Osun AG applies to withdraw suit against CBN and AGF. At the very top for the nation, Uzodinma, Tinubu's policies making Nigeria rich again. Fiscal reforms yielding results, says APC, Governors Forum, albeit slow. To the side of that story, Omotola, I shot my first film under pressure. And at the very bottom for The Nation, we find Omokri mobilizes support for Dangote refineries. And that's what we want to hear. Support local businesses and investors instead of create sabotage, and which leads to loss of jobs or none at all. But that's for The Nation.
Did you see the tweet about Reno Mockery?
Which one now? There were very many about
the former mayor of Texas.
I saw that. And that was rather damning.
Look,
Very
listen.
damning.
I need it framed, and I need someone who is a proper hater,
Oh, dear.
like who is to frame it, right? Every single time it comes on television or any single time, remind him that first line. How do you know when Reno is lying? When his mouth moves, gold.
Oh, wow.
Gold. I have never seen anything like it. You know what I mean? This is my call to all of my fellow pressmen and women. You know what I mean? Like every single time you have him on and he's about to talk, remind him. How do we know you're saying the truth? Given that this mayor has said, a personal friend of yours, that every single time how he knows that you lie is when your lips move.
Okay.
Moving on.
That's a personal opinion,
that's what they said now. It's not what the guy said.
Yeah,
and,
personal opinion.
That's what I ask you. Moving away from that, let's go to Saturday Tribune, shall we? At the very top there, federal government funds. ASUU AG withdraws suit against CBN AGF, says case overtaking by events. APC chairman councillors tenure expired on October 16th. You can find the story on page 10. Still on the newspaper editors, the conference has been shifted, the date has been shifted, and the president will be attending. We can find the story on page 31 of the Saturday Tribune. At the bottom of the headmaster, cars snatched in Southwest, sold in Abuja. Robbers were trailed, nabbed in FCT. Police smash another deadly gang in Lagos. That story is on page 8 and 9 of the Saturday Tribune. Casey Inkem Mazili trail at some event. You can find the story on page 36 there. And big shout out to Onyolugbile, the 2025 winner of the Nigeria Prize for Literature. She is quoted here saying what the prize, the grand prize, which is about $100,000, mean to her. And that means that literature do matter. You can find the story on page 13. She won for her book, Sonia. At the bottom there, Lotto magnate Adebutu donates about 4 billion naira for projects in Ogun local government areas. You can find that, and his hometown as well. You can find the story on page 36. ASUU insists on funding as Senate steps in to end the strike. That story is on page 36 as well of the Saturday Tribune. And finally, Omokri urges Nigerians to support Dangote refinery. That story is on page 16.
Okay. I think we have The Guardian up next, and I think I'm in love with The Guardian because of the annotated way they have their front page. You just take a look at the front page and then that's it.
Yeah.
It's always been so good. First big story here comes with a cartoon under has PDP crumbled? Big question. Has it crumbled in Southeast, South? I'm not sure who the caricature is supposed to be representing, but I see him that, what's that, a handbag? And he's running from the Southeast, or running from the PDP, and asking the APC bus to please wait for me before it heads to 2027. And it's a survival thing, it would seem. Can't wait for our strips tomorrow when we get to analyze some of these editorial cartoons. At the top for The Guardian, how accommodation crisis in higher institution diminishes rise in students' admission. And why Nigeria needs new universities after all. New Horizons bags global ICT recognition as award hits 307. At the bottom for The Guardian newspaper, you will find these headlines here. We can't find doctors to recruit. Kwara State government cries out. It's a sad situation if this is our reality currently. Once again, a touch on that one by Reno Omokri, why Nigerians must back Dangote refinery. Omokri tells. I'd like to read that myself on page 35 there if you're interested. And Senate wades into ASUU FG talks, seeks quick return of students to classrooms. Nigeria ready to lead Africa's economic revolution, Shatima declares. And of course, editors shift yearly conference to November 13 and 12, or rather 12 and 13 in Abuja. Tinubu to address all special guests of honor. And that's it for The Guardian newspaper. Always so concise.
Very concise indeed. We've seen the stately funeral that's undergoing in Kenya for the late Prime Minister, pretty much a beloved man in
Beloved
Kenya.
opposition.
Beloved opposition voice. And that's Raila Odinga. You can see that. We'll pull up our next paper, which is the Saturday Standard, all the way from Kenya. There you can see his body just being flanked by, the mixed members of the orderlies from the military
Armed
there.
forces, yeah.
And with also videos that have been littered on social media of just, first of all, the viewing
People
of his body.
thronging to see him. I'm like, was he such a powerful individual?
What? It was rowdy.
So you remember that they give a man his flowers before he dies?
No, they did.
I would. Was that the passion that followed his opposition for power? I mean, opposition of the current situation. You get what I mean?
Right.
Was he backed that much?
Yes,
politically.
He was. Yes,
by the electorate, by the voters, is what I'm
yes,
saying.
he was. And so I think after him was Uhuru Kenyatta, if I'm sure. If I'm positive, and then from Uhuru Kenyatta was Ruto, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the procession. But one thing he's done is he's always been the voice of reason. Although he has his own, his own every leader, whether I want to say Obama or Bill Clinton or even the King himself, King Charles, they all do have their own. What's the word I'm looking for? Their scandals that have trailed them. But one thing is certain, he is loved by the people. He is a strong opposition. He stands for the people's will. And I do remember that during the protest that was happening last year, he was very supportive of it. And the Gen Zs had thrown their support behind him and was hoping that he would come out of in good health and be able to run again to fix what was going on with the economy. So they really did support him. And you can tell that when the crowd was coming out, when his body had been repatriated and back into Kenya, they flocked to the tarmac. It was, and then they went to where they were supposed to have the state lying in state where they were supposed to view the body. It was rowdy. It was rowdy, and I think people lost their lives.
Rowdy, there were gunshots.
Yeah, there were gunshots, and there were cars plowing into the crowds. There were videos on. It's wild when. It is wild when you think about what happened, right? But they did, at the end, try to bring some sort of order. But Raila Odinga, and just watching how the people have celebrated him, his family, his associates, those who were with him in power, those who left with him, they all refer to him as Baba and Father. And it just really goes to show to have that much love with the younger generation is really, really hard.
Especially considering his age.
Yeah, you're right, because he was in exactly 80s, and they were much younger, and some were not even born then, but they do respect him, and they honor and love him. And this is good. I mean, today's a final day for the funeral, and you can see the pictures and the videos as well of people who are processing to the last place. Is wild. Again, may his souls rest in peace. And pretty much that was the major story really coming out of Kenya today.
So good that we took that Kenyan paper there. I do disagree with you on one little bit.
What's it mean?
Obama was perfect. We've got one more segment for the show today. If I'm correct, we have exhausted the papers for this morning. So we'll be taking a short break, and then we'll be bringing you our final segment. Do stay tuned. This is still Breakfast Extra. So let's talk about the big report here regarding the Cameroon elections. Well, it's been quite the week, and so far protests, arrests as results were delayed. Now, tensions are mounting in Cameroon following protests of alleged vote manipulation in the October 12 presidential elections. Several people were arrested in 2 cities after clashes with police, while authorities insist that calm has been restored and the process remains under the rule of law. Election observers have praised the overall conduct of the polls, but called for transparency as citizens express concern over the prolonged delay in releasing results. So what gives? Well, News Central correspondent Kathleen Ndomo brings us a report here on this.
Three days have passed since citizens cast their ballots in Cameroon's October 12 presidential election, and the country continues to wait for election results. In several cities, crowds gathered outside administrative offices demanding that their votes be protected. insisting on transparency at the local level. Several people were arrested on Wednesday after clashes between residents and security forces in the economic capital Douala and the western city of Chang following allegations of ballot manipulation by election officials. The unrest adds to growing frustration over the slow release of presidential results.
Le Cameroun est un pays de droit. Les instances habilitées en charge du processus électoral sont à pied d'œuvre et qui, à terme, permettront au Conseil constitutionnel de rendre public le résultat des élections. Nous ne pouvons donc pas comprendre cette effervescence que les uns et les autres veulent entretenir et instrumentaliser à Douala. De toutes les façons, les forces de maintien de l'ordre, en étroite liaison et synergie avec les autorités administratives, nous ne le permettrons pas. Nous ne permettrons pas qu'il y ait du désordre à Douala.
In Chang, a courthouse and ruling party office were set ablaze. In Limbe, Bafang and Bafoussam, crowds gathered to demand that election result sheets be made public. The Interior Minister has rejected opposition candidate Issa Chiroma Bakari's declaration of early victory, calling it unconstitutional and an attempt to disrupt the electoral process. Ruling party officials insist that only the Constitutional Council has the authority to announce official results, which are expected next week. Meanwhile, the African Union's Election Observation Mission described the polls as largely peaceful and orderly, though it acknowledged logistical delays and called for stronger safeguards to improve transparency.
La mission formule des recommandations ci-après. Au ministère de l'administration territoriale et à Élections Cameroun, s'assurer de la distribution effective et à temps des cartes d'électeurs avant le scrutin. S'assurer que lors de la clôture du scrutin, les cartes non retirées soient comptées, mises sous pli, cachetées et transmises aux instances habilitées conformément à l'article 85 alinéa 4 du Code électoral. Privilégier les voies légales en cas de contestation des résultats. Privilégier le dialogue et la concertation à l'effet de la résolution pacifique des différends électoraux.
Critics say the observer's praise risks being read as legitimizing an electoral process under strain. Cameroon's prolonged wait for results contrasts sharply with recent elections in neighboring countries. In Gabon, provisional 2025 election results were announced within a day. In Senegal, it took just 3 days for opposition candidate Bassirou Diomaye Faye to be confirmed the winner of the 2024 presidential elections. Cameroonians, by contrast, are still waiting nearly a week later, with many now questioning why they must wait so long.
As a young Cameroonian, all we just want is peace, according to the time it takes to compile and publish the results. For me, it would be better for the government to take fewer time to publish the results so as to push the Cameroonian out of the suspense that we are going through.
Respectons quand même la décision du peuple. C'est le peuple qui est souverain. Parce que même après les 2 semaines qu'on nous dit d'attendre là, moi je pense que il serait louable que même après 2 semaines là, ils montrent qu'ils sont des patriotes. Parce que être patriote, c'est respecter la volonté du peuple.
Cameroon is currently navigating sensitive times. In the days leading to the Constitutional Council's announcement, possibly next week, there's growing concern about more protests in opposition strongholds. Analysts warn that this could trigger further instability. Economically, the uncertainty in the country is already weighing on confidence and could delay key policy decisions. How the country emerges from this post-electoral period could shape its political stability for years to come. In Yaoundé, reporting for News Central, Kathleen Ndongmo.
Captain Doma there from Yaoundé on the Cameroonian elections, which we're still expecting the results. It's only in Cameroon that it feels like elections are a perpetual birthday party, where you know who the celebrant is going to be every single time. You're just waiting to see who or what's you're laughing to waiting to see what the flavor of the cake is going to be. But this year seems a bit different, as there's plenty of youth participation, it would seem, and plenty of committed concern. The prolonged absence of a result announcement, however, gives plenty of concern. What's happening in the background? Are things going to be manipulated? So you can imagine the agitation of the electorate. But they're still up. They're still waiting. People want to see. But what exactly are they voting for or against? Is it voting for habit versus hope? Because that's what it seems to be. They were not presented with as many candidates as could be considered democratic. Many of them are taking out even before the election. So Cameroon is indeed at a situation where everybody is holding their breaths to see what happens next. Judith, I don't know if you agree with some of the things that I've just said.
Well, yeah, I mean, you made solid points about, waiting and to see how things are. But I do understand where the fear and the worry comes from. And this goes to stem from a huge distrust in the entire process. There's a trust deficit. And we've seen this play out. I always say this, that different countries in Africa are just different sides of the same coin. You know what I mean? We have the same issues that have plagued us, and that one big one at the core of it is our distrust in institutions. And it's very clear that for change to happen in a country like Cameroon that has the longest serving president ever, and oldest as well, who is now vying for another, 8th term, or after 8th term, goes to show that at the end of the day, it's really not at the hands of the people, it's at the hand of the institution to do the right thing. That's really what it is.
And then there's questions to be answered by the electoral apparatus itself. Elecam, is that what they call it?
Yeah, Election Cameroon.
Why the silence? Perhaps tell the people what's going on exactly, because that will stem agitation.
Yeah.
It's like waiting for somebody to bring a package to you and you're not hearing from the dispatch rider. Doesn't that make you really angsty? Where is this guy?
Yeah.
So it's the same thing, especially with the situation where they've had to wait over 40 years for this kind of an election that seems to bring a bit of hope to the people. It's not like it's what they would have preferred, because they would have preferred younger candidates, but there isn't none. So let's just devil at a deep blue sea.
Did you see the video online? There's a social media video. I don't know. I can't confirm if that was really from Cameroon, but when you look at the sheets, they were in the polling unit. I think it was a school, the counting, and then he pulled out the record sheets, which is a collation data sheet. And after they calculated, apparently the votes that were supposed to go for the opposition, he had turned it to BS party. And from nowhere, we just heard whoop on the electoral officer, the presiding officer on that polling unit. And next thing they rush him, I'm like, what? And so that's the level of agitation and just the angst and just the need for change, the desire for one for change. But again, it always falls down to the presiding officers, the electoral officers, and those who are in charge of doing change. I really wish that we can put aside systems and talk about morals and character, because at the end of the day, character it really is what that matters. And ELECAM, they can carry an election that seems to be good on paper, but at the end of the day, is what happens behind closed doors that really matters. And so transparency is very, very important. I wish we have observers who are in those rooms as well as those numbers are being collated. If observers can get the copies, I don't know how the mechanism can work where we can ensure transparency every single step of the way until the announcement itself, to allay the fears of electorates. But I think that's a conversation that needs to be had about transparency in every process of it. To me,
my final take on this is the fact that there were a huge lot of people who were disenfranchised, people who were unable to actually take part in the elections. And if you take statistics, you'd find that these are people from the Anglophone areas. And of course, the crisis that has followed these Anglophone regions since. And due to that, I'm wondering how democratic the election really was. If you still have that underlying factor, then how does the outcome really tell what the people want? Is it fair? Is it a fair democratic election at the end of the day? Apart from all the other issues that plagues Cameroon, with the current president being well overaged, as they say, and of course having been there for decades at this time. So there are more to consider. The issues with the Anglophone and Francophone regions, how that affected the votes from last weekend, the time it's taking to announce these results, and what to expect. I think we're all holding our breaths and waiting.
We are holding our breaths indeed. We'll wait to see what the results will be coming this week. But hey, many thanks for doing this with us. We appreciate you for joining us 8 a.m. bright and early this morning, from our monologue all the way down to our big story as we looked at IMF's instructions for Nigeria when it comes to tightening our fiscal reforms. Also, we did take a look at politics as well, as we're seeing carpet crossing, or better yet, defections into the APC from the PDP, as PDP is losing ranks in the South.
Is it losing ranks?
It is losing its strongest base in the South.
I will say this, at the risk of getting into trouble, we thank God that the PDP is not a prophylactics company, because if they were, we would be facing a massive population explosion that we can't handle eventually. So thank goodness they're not.
Also, we did talk about education, not to forget. We know that the ASUU is on strike. We spoke to Sumaya Abubakar, who brought us a report from earlier this week, as well as an education researcher. Then we did switch gears to talk a bit about security in Kogi State, where we had our correspondent Mona Balabobo and a security analyst give us insight as crackdowns are happening in remote areas of Kogi State. Pretty much all we discussed on here. Make sure to join us tomorrow bright and early, 8 a.m. in the morning. Zeno is bringing you monologues, so you want to stay tuned for that. Plus, you got 8 a.m. Until we come your way. Good morning.